Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. What did you think of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, directed by, I believe the pronunciation is Emma Tammi. So, yes, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Let's go ahead and explain everything before I fully get into it. But what is this movie about? It is about... Hang on. I really cannot go over the description without me going over it like with it written out myself. 1 year has passed since the supernatural nightmare at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The stories about what transpired there have been twisted into local legend, inspiring the town's first ever Fazfest. Concerning the fate of her animatronic friends, Abby sneaks out to reconnect with Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. It will set into motion a terrifying series of events revealing dark secrets about the true origin of Freddy's and unleashing a long-forgotten horror hidden away for decades. So, I don't believe I had the podcast around when the first one had come out, but I did see it. It was back when Peacock was doing that thing where they were doing same-day streaming and putting it in theaters simultaneously due to COVID, due to restrictions, whatever it may have been. And I remember they did that for Halloween Kills, and that one, I watched it at home. I'm all for the theater experience, but the indications of the sort of fan base being sort of on the younger side definitely prevented me from really watching any further, just because I know how that audience can get. So the second one is only in theaters. I mean, I'll never advocate against that. And I thought the first one was passable. I thought that it was decent. I know some people that are big fans of this series, so I understand the appeal. I understand that it very much has like a sort of meme-based nature baked into it. I feel like I'm on the internet too much, but I also know about the whole like the Nightmare Freddy song that's always playing on TikTok right now. Gets stuck in my head. But I gotta be honest, I felt like the first one, like I said, was passable. I liked that Matthew Lillard was in it. I thought the animatronics were amazing. I thought Josh Hutcherson was doing a decent job, even though I feel like he's a better actor than what they give him to work with. But all of that out of the way, if you can't tell my apprehension here with this movie, did I love it, did I hate it, or am I somewhere between on it? Well, I really did not enjoy this movie whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I hated it. I really did not like it. I thought that the intro was solid. We'll get into everything right now, but I thought that overall, I found this a profoundly uninteresting and boring experience. I thought that it just did not work on any level. It was not scary. It was not effective really in anything. The performances were weird and off kilter, and not in like an inviting way, more in like a half of them seemed disinterested and the other half just didn't seem equipped to work with what they were given to work with. We're going to get into that, and I'm going to apologize to some actors here in a second, but I'd heard some people say that this was better than the first one, but this one, some people said that the animatronics weren't in the first one a lot, but having seen this one, they're in it a fair amount, but I feel like they don't do a single thing with them. I thought that it was so strange that the concept of this, from my understanding, was that they go into the parlor, the Chuck E. Cheese type thing, Freddy Fazbear's, and then like it's like a security guard, and they watch the cameras, and things pop out at you, and like that's the experience. But here, there seems to be all of this lore that's like dedicated here with like Charlotte and the marionette and all of this stuff, and it's just inaccessible to me. If I'm saying all this and it's ringing a bell to you because you're a fan of this, then this is made for you. People clapped at the end of this experience that I had, and I, in the middle of it, was like, I'm bored out of my mind. It was so strange because I now understand what it's like when people had told me that, like, I never understood why people were like, oh, I don't quite love Marvel. I like some of this stuff, but I feel lost. Here, I was like, I don't get a single thing that's happening or going on in front of me. But it makes no attempt to let you know either. I thought that it just did not work very well. The intro, I think, does work very well. I actually, as a matter of fact, when it first starts, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to be the person that's like, I'm in the minority. It's at, 12% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I dig it. I like it. I thought that the setup with Charlotte, where all of these adults in the beginning weren't listening to her because they seem so caught up in their own world or whatever it may be, and she gets frustrated with them, and then Matthew Lillard's character stabs her in the back quite literally, and she dies, and it shuts down the Fazbear location. I thought all of that was interesting. I did notice immediately that the irony of these movies being is that they struggle with the fact that they don't get to be rated R, so every single scare that they set up doesn't actually get to be scary because they can't commit to actually, provoking in any kind of way. And so it's weird. I think that they're caught in a rock and a hard place because the jump scares, the setup, that's fine. That's all good. And then they don't follow through properly and instead just substitute in the type of thing that I really just cannot stand. And it's just a really, really, really loud noise. And that just substitutes for what the scare is. And sometimes, a couple of times, I thought it worked. The marionette, I think, is a really, really creepy design that works very well here. And then it kind of gets overplayed. But for the sake of it, when it starts, I thought that the design was interesting. I thought that when it overtakes different people, it really is a provocative looking image. I think that it's scary. It works well. But then to the subject of what's supposed to be considered scary here is the animatronics, and when they are intended for that purpose, it doesn't work because they're usually shot in like really bright, stark lighting. They spend part of this movie just walking around out and about during the day, and I know that part of it is Abby's friends or whatever. I guess I didn't even get into the positives and negatives. I did not like this movie at all. I have a couple positive things to say, but we'll go in the back and forth here. But I feel all over the place about this. This movie was all over the place, but it's just strange because when the animatronics are then intended to be scary, this movie can't decide what it wants to do, because then there ends up being the section of like I think they're called Toy Freddy, Toy Chico, and then the actual original ones that are the real heroes, but then these are supposed to be scary, and the marionette is really the only thing that comes off as effective. I will say a positive here is that the animatronics are unbelievably well done. Those are incredible designs done by Jim Henson Factory, and they just have that really hefty clunk to them. They feel aesthetically heavy, and I like that about it. I like the kind of polished look, that there's a kind of an uncanny thing there. And there even seems to be a sort of nature to this movie that it knows that the animatronics, that like what sort of kid would want to visit a place like this, because there's a line like that in the movie, like what kind of kid would want to come here. And that feels like the movie then knows what it is, but then it reverts back to just being nonsense to me. It was just... Here's the thing about this. I know that this is going to be the type of movie that people say, it's for the fans, it's for the fans. Oh, if you went and saw this and it wasn't for you, then whatever, it's for us. More power to you. I'm very glad that you enjoyed it, but I also think that you should maybe raise your standards a little bit, because the fan service here, I don't know what any of it was, but the thing is, on a story level, this movie doesn't make any sense. It's like... I remember the thing about the first one. The ending is that Abby wants her friends back. They say this line over and over and over and over in like the first half hour, that she wants her friends back, and that like it sets up to this guy that lures them into this original location. The original location holds this marionette that it has the body of the girl baked in because she felt rage, right? And then it just felt like all this exposition dump stuff to me could have been, I don't know, maybe shown. Like the intro was cool. I thought that was solid. You could have done that, done another flashback, because in the middle, the pacing of this movie is horrendous. Like it takes forever to start, and it takes such a long time because it spends so much time with Abby. And I really don't want to trash talk on child actors or anything like that, but she's just not very good in this. I think that Josh Hutcherson's doing a fine job, but he's barely in this movie. And then once it starts to focus onto him, by that point, it's a little bit too little too late, because then he's caught up with the girl from the first one Vanessa, right? And I just never really gravitated to her in the first one either. And then here, there's so much time spent on her character. And like, I know why she's important because of the Afton name. And then it turns out that there's all these twists about like a guy named Michael. That's apparently, I like that. But like the guy named Michael, and then our main character is Mike. And then it's revealed that he's the brother of her. And it just felt so like based on something, like it very much felt like based on something that I have absolutely no familiarity with. It kept info dumping names onto me, and then the names I'd be like, can you explain? Like, here's the thing is I want to be willing to enjoy these. I thought the first one was fine. I thought this one, though, the more caught up it gets in just pleasing one subsect of people that are already interested in this, then I feel like I'm obviously left out in the dark, and maybe that's my fault for going to see this and not having really familiarity with the franchise, other than some of the memes and then some of the people, like some of the names of some of the characters. But outside of that, I just don't quite get it, you know? Like there's two sequences that I think work really well on a horror level. Is this movie scary? No, because it keeps undercutting itself because it has to be PG-13. And I don't think that any movie needs to be PG-13. Isn't Insidious PG-13? There's a horror movie that is PG-13 that's like ridiculous that it is, but it is. I think that it's possible, but I also really like gateway horror. I grew up on Goosebumps. I grew up on this idea that you can really get into horror when you're younger. And that's really cool. But in order for that to happen, I would also like for the thing to be good. And some of the stuff here works pretty well. I think that the intro, like I said, works pretty well. It's tense. I like the sort of lighting there. I like the background of like Matthew Lillard's character. I'm also a huge fan of Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich. I'll get into that in a second. But I think that the whole opening segment works. I think that it reminded me very much of Stephen King, where the adults aren't listening. They're so caught up in the conversations that they don't want to react to a kid getting kidnapped. I think that all works fine for me. And then it cuts to all this stuff after where it's just like, I don't mind slow burn movies, but it's hilarious to me that this movie is a slow burn movie but it doesn't feel slow burn on purpose. It feels aimless for 30 minutes. It feels like it's dragging its feet to get started, and that there's like a detective element to this, and I love that stuff. You'll hear me talk about that when I review Wake Up Dead Man, but it's just so strange that this movie is paced like this. And it like, I remember the first one had this weird kind of aimless quality to it too, where Josh Hutcherson keeps having all these dreams, and they're referenced here, but he's not the lead anymore. So we're kind of just like, he pops in every once in a while and is like, oh yeah, I got this thing going on, and then he like takes off. And Abby ends up being our lead, which, like I said, if maybe she was just, I don't know, another take was done for this actress, that could have been something. But it's the weakest link is arguably the main character of this movie. And then I don't want to harp on that too much because I feel bad, but it's one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of wasted talent here in this movie to begin with. Josh Hutcherson is in this. McKenna Grace is in this. Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard are in this movie. Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard are, you know, if I'm going to spoil another movie here for a second, the ending of the first Scream, they're the two killers. That's one of my favorite movies ever. It's heavily inspired me. It's heavily inspired a lot of my work in terms of like what I love, what I do, and whenever I write something. Skeet Ulrich is in one scene in this, and he has audio here that in the end credits scene, and he references that they're partners. Do they ever meet on screen at any point in this movie? No, they don't. And it's a weird thing that Matthew Lillard's in this again because he's barely in it too. He's in maybe 2 scenes, and one's like an extended dream sequence that has like one of the worst jump scares I've seen in a long time, where all these doors open and they're super loud, and then he just like runs really fast towards the camera. It's weird. Like, I think that since this movie knows its appeal is to an audience of a certain age that I am not anymore, that it has to be PG-13, but then it can't commit, much like the first one, because I remember this because it stood out to me. There's one kill in that, and it's like the one with like the briefest side of blood, and they do that here again. There's one with Wayne Knight of all people who's in this, and one of the best parts of it because he's Wayne Knight, and it's hampered down though by arguably the worst thing about this movie is its script. It's really, really poorly written, and I think it's written by the original creator of the games. So I would figure maybe he would know these characters well enough to know how to do this, but maybe you could have gotten an outsider perspective of somebody that's not very familiar with your work, because now it just feels very like, I don't want to keep harping on inaccessible. Is this for fans? Yes. Am I technically a fan? I would like to be. I would like to be in on this. I like the concept. I like the idea of like the killer animatronics and this idea of like being within the, the confines of an abandoned Chuck E. Cheese-esque place. It's a brilliant idea, and the animatronics have always been scary. Those animatronics are scary to an extent in this. The older ones with like the malformed heads and everything, but then they also want them to be friendly, and like I get that concept in terms of like, being aesthetically like deceptive, because that's possible. But then they don't really shoot them in any kind of light to make them interesting in any kind of way, except for that beginning part. And then there's one other part in this movie that works really well, and it's really early on. I was actually kind of fooled for a little while, and I think that's why I got like really salty towards the end of it, because it's this moment where they're going through this like river walk type thing. Like it's this ride and they're walking through it, and it's the marionette over and over. And that's the scene where it happens, where he's like, what kind of kid would want to be in this place? And the tension there works really well. You hear the background noises, you hear that the marionette, like all of them are crawling under the water. And then anytime this movie starts to escalate any kind of tension or do anything like that to make a solid jump scare, what it does is it undercuts itself by either making the jump scare happen really fast, there's no tension building for the scene to happen, or it just immediately, the jump scare happens and then it feels like there's a delay. Like it feels like the jump scare will happen, but then the noise is a couple seconds after, or maybe even before. I don't know. I just felt like never immersed, because it seemed never wanting to commit, because I kept thinking about the fact that it has to market itself to an audience that can't go and see an R-rated movie. And I remember that I know the fan base of this is definitely like, I saw that this was at 89% on the audience score. I can also confirm for a fact, I was teaching 10th grade English a couple years ago, and that age group, like 14 through 18, they loved the first one at the very least, from what I'm aware. And I said that my complaint to them, that I was like, I feel like this just can't commit to wanting to be not for adults, and it feels very much like hampered by the fact that it wants to cater to kids. And they got mad at me because they said that no, there's gore and stuff and the kids died, and it's obviously very much like still for adults or like grown up later teenagers. And I can't help but disagree, because I feel like it wants to be, but I feel like it really also wants to cater to an age group that just weighs it all down. And then the final act of this is incomprehensible. It doesn't make any sense. It wants to ramp up the tension by making the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff like escalate into the neighborhood, which is cool idea, I guess. But then like there's also the whole festival thing going on and simultaneously, which is a trope, which I don't mind. They do it in a lot of stuff, but I mean, hey, they do it in Scream, they do it in a couple other things that I'm blanking on right now. But take it for what it's worth, I guess. Like, I don't mind that. It's funny because they're even like, the whole master plan that her brother is going to do is that he's like, this is the night that they're all going to die. They're in the middle of this neighborhood. They're all going to blend in. No, they're not. They're like gigantic and huge. And there's like that, of course, that joke where it's like, I don't know, that's kind of fake looking. And then they're like, oh, that guy's going to win. And like, yeah, the joke's been done, right? But I mean, not to that extent, like maybe a couple of the other ones, but then they're all wearing these like costumes. Like those things still stand out completely. They do not fit in their environment. But the two segments I think work really well are the moment at the very beginning and then the whole river boat sequence. But that's it. And then everything else, I kept giving it benefit of the doubt, but then I kept thinking that it kept undercutting itself. At the school, with the model thing, I thought that the whole like science fair thing with Wayne Knight, there's a horrendous line that they beat into the ground that they say over and over with Megan Fox's character, right? Keep saying, I want to see what's inside your head. And I think I counted. This line is said 4 times. 4. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like, oh, this is going to be the iconic line. There's going to be like memes about it, whatever. But when that shit feels forced, it feels so forced. And this just felt like beating me over the head, ironically enough. And then it can't commit to the kill because then it's PG-13. So there's nothing there of interest. The payoff is nothing. And then she says, oh, nothing. Nothing is there. And you're like, cool. And then it just moves on. And I just sat there and I kept getting infuriated, but I'm clearly like not the demographic for this, because then I saw it with a bunch of teenagers around me and like adults that took their kids, and then there's this dad that clearly loved it because he was saying something about like, don't enter in access codes because of whatever, and I was like, that must be from the game or something that they referenced because it was also in the movie, but I'm not in on this. And so I just like, if the critique here is going to be that like, to me is, oh, you should play the games then. There should be a reason why I got out of this to want to go and play those. Like, I want that to also, just like constructive criticism here is, like I said, the first one I thought was fine. The second one just seems so caught up in just referencing things that like I said, just didn't get. And then there was even a line where like some guy says, looks like you need a lawyer, and people laugh, and I was like, that's gotta be a reference, because like why else would the camera slowly pause and like just do all that? But I just like think it's funny that for any positive thing it undercuts itself by like not committing to being scary. And I mean, hey, clearly, like, I think that there's going to be an audience for this. I'm not part of it. I wish I could have enjoyed this movie. It even kind of fooled me early on with some of this stuff. Corey Kenshin's in this. That's cool. I recognize him. I know who that is. But the positives for me, outside of like those two sequences, are I think that Josh Hutcherson's okay in this. I think that Matthew Lillard is okay in this and gets nothing to do. Skeet Ulrich is in literally one scene. I can't even get into the critique of that. But the negatives heavily outweigh any of the positives. The plot's incomprehensible. I just like felt like there was no urgency for anything going on. And it makes me realize just how hard the tight walk of getting something to feel tense even is like when there's that much back and forth. I felt like this during the first one too. It was one of my big critiques of the first one, is it felt aimless. It felt like there was no tension because I felt like they could easily get out of any event that was happening. And the animatronics are so damn slow. Like, in order for any of the people to be caught or be killed, they need to like move heavily, like slowly. The animatronics do, like you hear the thump over and over. So there's this one jump scare with Foxy, like on the top of the truck with Vanessa, that like I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me because that would have been loud, and I don't know how he got there in the first place. Like, I'm willing to accept plot holes and stuff. Like, if the thing's entertaining, like, I don't mind that. But when you're not making any kind of commitment to anything else, I'm gonna, like, get caught up in that just because that's, you know, the rules of the world. If you're setting up to me that they're stuck in one place and their whole thing is that the moment that they get out, then what, they're faster? But no, then the moment that they get out and they're in people's houses, they're still moving slow. So what is the, like, what is this? Like, what is the operating mechanics of this world? And I don't get caught up in stuff like that. I usually don't. I'm usually one of the people that's like, if it's like tangible to the world, then it is what it is. I don't mind. But no, it doesn't make any sense here. And the negatives, like I said, are the whole thing with Abby and this and the marionette and all of like the world, the rules. There's so many rules here, and then every single rule feels like it's broken because then they were keeping all this stuff secret, and Josh Hutcherson gets mad at his like kind of girlfriend at the very end. I want to say something really quick about the end of this movie. I feel like they needed to make sure this was an hour 40, and is it Scott Cawthon got to what, page 96, and he was like, oh, I can't quite wrap this up right away. What should I do? And so the whole thing with the marionette taking over Vanessa, like that being the ending, and then he's like, we don't trust you, and then they walk off, and then she gets possessed, and the movie ends there. I was like, it was one of the most anticlimactic endings I think I've seen in a movie in a long time. This movie reminded me so much of Halloween Kills, kind of in that way, where I'm like, this feels like a middle chapter of something, but like at least Halloween Kills, like I was a fan of that, so I kind of knew what was going on there. Here I was just clueless, and it just felt like all these like character motivations, like she was hiding things, and then it's gonna be a whole like, oh, I was keeping this for this purpose, but it's just a lot of the dialogue here I just did not buy into. It's very poorly written. The whole what's inside your head thing like really drove me crazy, and there was not a lot going on here. And the second half I thought was going to pick up, and then it just got progressively worse. The more the animatronics seemed to be in it, the more I started questioning just kind of every rule that was in this. And I'm sorry, like any other positives, I kind of liked how it was shot. I liked this kind of like dreamlike, it seems to really utilize this like full screen kind of dreamscape feel to it really well. That's it though. I like the design of the animatronics, like I said. I like how they look. The marionette's a great design. But going forward, I hope that the revision for the third one is at least like, just commit to something. Like if you're going to make it like campy horror, go for that, because there's a couple times where I feel like it does want to acknowledge some of its own shortcomings and then pulls back on that and then starts getting to this really heavy self-serious lore that I just could never buy into, because why do I care? Because it didn't help me out with caring. I'm fully willing to accept a movie with, like talking killer animatronics that are haunted by kids. Why not? But give me like explanations. Give me reasons for why. I don't need every single bit of plot explained. I don't like that. What I need is a reason to care, and not necessarily explained verbally. Please don't do that again with the dialogue. You guys did that plenty. I mean, visually, like, what is the motivation or purpose of like the things happening here? It just felt like so self-aggrandizing and so self-serious, and then felt very invitational only to the people that were, familiar with the lore beforehand. I didn't like it. I really, really did not like it. I got a headache by the end of it. That's how I know I did not like a movie. Is that I was sitting there like this for like half of it. But like I said, people clapped when this was over. People clapped during random ass scenes that were in this movie. So it's for somebody, just not me. And it was so weird to have like scenes that were considered funny by people, and I was just like, I'm not into this. And yeah, it makes me wonder why it was easier on the first one. Maybe because I saw it at home. But yeah, I'm gonna give this a score 1.5 out of 5. Let's go with that. Let's go with 1.5 out of 5. It's been a while since I have given a score that low, but it is what it is. I'm sorry, guys. What did you think of Five Nights at Freddy's 2? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Coming up next is... I'm going to have to look. I think it's Wake Up Dead Man. Yeah. I've already seen that a couple times. I think I'm going to watch that a third before I review it, just to refresh your thing when it comes out on Netflix. But thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.